Hi all, I thought it would be interesting to look at the second game of the Kamsky So match, and this basically eliminated Kamsky from the World Cup. Just going to put the engine on just in case for tactical variations. Okay, so c4, f5, and the reason this interested me, even though it was a draw, which is all so needed to eliminate Kamsky, it was a Leningrad Dutch which I played recently with the gambit idea of playing for f4. So we'll see here Leningrad Dutch territory. But Kamsky chooses actually the move Queen e8, which is something I mentioned in the video I did. So there's Knight c6 as well as an alternative. But Queen e8 with the idea of just going straight away for e5. So it's interesting how White reacted to this. White just took on e5 and played e4, allowing this positional sacrifice, f4. After G takes f4, Black really just decided to try and put more pressure on d4 by playing bishop g4. So potentially he's going to take on f3, undermine White's control of d4 a bit more, and then later maybe play on the dark squares like f4 as well. But knight d5 was played. Now knight a6. White took on f6. Bishop takes f6. And now, it seems actually technically White is better, according to Rybka. And Rybka's actually recommending Queen d5 check, just grabbing this pawn actually. And this is what was played. So I think this is over gambiting. Already this seems to be a bit of a disaster, you could say, a tactical disaster, because knight a6 just basically, falling for knight f6 and queen d5 to win b7. Unless there's very clear compensation, this is overdoing it, I think, with the with the positional sacrifices. So queen takes b7. I mean, the queen's a bit out of play, but it has got it can munch now on c7 actually, maybe. But So played queen b5, just offering the exchange of queens. I think it was safe to take, or maybe even well, taking on c7 was plausible as well. So queen b5 is not a bad move. Knight d3. Black's got a bit of pressure, but White takes the queens off now and plays simply rook d1. So pawn situation: 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 pawns up, but Black should be getting at least one of the pawns back. So he plays knight takes f4. So he's getting one of them back, but White plays bishop takes f4. And now e5, so potentially liberating this bishop on the diagonal. So White's pieces are getting freer now, and it's difficult for Black. He's a clear pawn down without much positional compensation. White plays actually now knight d4, and I'm not sure immediately why bishop takes c4 isn't that bad. In fact, Rybka's sort of indicating bishop c4. So b3, say. Right, in this position, Black would be clearly, I think, worse if bishop f7, then there's e6, because takes knight e6 and rook d5. However, there is an opportunity here, maybe, actually, for bishop a6, and that might not be that bad. Bishop d5, king h8, knight e6. It's not that pleasant for Black, and White still has a small advantage. So, maybe that's why Kamsky didn't take on c4. He played actually king h8. So he just wants to try and regain the e5 pawn without falling into a skewer of rook and king. So White actually played now bishop c6, a forcing move. Rook moves, now bishop d5. So White is not concerned about e5. Just wants to get rid of Black's bishop pair. So bishop h3, Kamsky refuses. But now we have rook d3, another forcing move. So what to do with this bishop? Rook takes e5. So the idea here is there's a tactical trick, rook g5 and bishop takes d4. So White took on h3, allowing that tactical trick to happen. Now in this opposite coloured bishop position, I think White's slightly better. And White took possession now of the e file, which is a good sign. Black played bishop c5. Perhaps technically better would have been just rook e5, but it seems a bit too humble, too passive. Black really has to try to win this to stay in the World Cup. It's an elimination event, and each round the grandmaster's playing, they get more money, actually, the further they can progress. So Kamsky really wants to win. He doesn't want another rook exchange. So bishop d6, rook b3. The problem is, black's pawns are a bit fragmented here. White has f3 under control, making f3 a bit hard to play, to pursue an attack. Black targeted anyway this isolated pawn, but now h3, king g7, rook b7. So these pawns are now being targeted. King h8, h6 rather, bishop f3, offering h3 now. So why has h3 been offered? Well, h3 was taken, and so we'll see king g2. The rook's running out of squares. It's only got one square now, rook h4. And now here, white played rook b5. And the rook is kind of trapped, really, at the moment. How will it escape? Because this pawn is blocking in the bishop. So there's not many squares for it, and h5 is covered. So as Kamsky plays rook f7, he's like playing a rook down in effect now. So rook d5, whilst white's rooks are dominating the centre, and now c5 is also threatened. Bishop f8, c5, so squeezing the bishop, so the rook's sort of out of play. The bishop's now kind of not that great, it has to go on this diagonal, so it goes on that diagonal. But now this b4, so white has potentially winning passed pawn. If you can correct passed pawn on the queen side, the 3-2 pawn majority should be able to tell. So bishop c3. White actually plays the humble-looking a3. Maybe he can play b5. Rivka's saying b5 is playable here. There's no tactical disaster apparently. But a3 was played. I think Wesley was just contented with a draw now, just using the fact this rook is trapped. Black's a rook down basically. Bishop b2, now rook a6. So again, more pressure on a7. Rook e7, so the pawn's snapped up. Black maybe can try and coordinate the rooks now via h1. But rook h1 is not permitted. Rook d1 is played to snap off that communication. So rook takes d1, bishop takes d1. And I think with this move a draw was offered, which Kamsky accepted. He is worse here. There's a 3-1 pawn majority. With this pawn in dire straits, bishop e5 might be forced here. If we have a look at this, say Rivka's giving f3 as the strongest, but still with a big advantage to white, with the idea of rook c4. So let's have a quick look at that. So rook c4. So with the idea of rook c7, bishop takes a3 and trying to munch these pawns. But even so, this would still be better for white. In this position, bishop d5 apparently. Because now if takes, then c6. And white's also got bishop g8 as a threat. So this kind of position, this is getting very dangerous. With h7, I think, being targeted. Why is bishop d6 being played there? Well, bishop b7 now is a threat. So if black has to give up the bishop, then this is better for white. But even worse would have been in the final position, bishop e5. If bishop e5, then apparently just b5 here. And now this f3 maybe is not as effective, I guess. So bishop takes check. Now these pawns are really getting dangerous. a4, I think they're unstoppable. So I think white would have a winning position here. So basically, really had the advantage most, if not all the way through this game as well, if we have a look in overview and summary. So it was a Leningrad Dutch variation with that gambit idea that I mentioned a few videos ago, but with the queen e8 system being played, so not knight c6. To be honest, I prefer the look of knight c6 and knight e5 to this, because it looks as though white's kind of comfortable after just taking the pawn on knight d5. White seems to be quite a bit better. In fact, although knight a6 seems to be a bit of a silly move, losing b7, it's given as one of the strongest moves available to black. What can black do here otherwise is the question. Say c6, then knight c7, embarrassing Falk. So it's a difficult position here. If knight takes d5, then again I think, queen d5 might be a good move, but also just e takes, and there's pressure on the queen, and this is nasty as well. So after this, I think white maintains the advantage. Knight a6 is given as one of the better moves, but it's not that pleasant. So really, Wesley had a great game here as well in the second game. Had a persistent advantage, which made it very difficult for black to try for a win. In fact, he was lucky in the end that Wesley didn't play for the win. So the rook being stranded in the end. In fact, the draw was offered, I think, soon after this. So, yeah, so Wesley So's shown he's a solid 26-40 at the age of 16. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.